there, it's Sandra here from Huron Ridge, and thanks so much for joining me today in the greenhouse. Today I'm going to show you how you can build your very own terrarium. So you can gather your supplies at home, or if you'd like, you can come to the greenhouse and pick up one of our terrarium kits. What each kit includes is a little bag with some potting soil, a little bag with some charcoal and some sheet moss, and a little bag with some stones and a couple of little animals for you. Now, what you're going to start with is your empty jar. And in the bottom of your empty jar, you're going to place your stones. Now, the reason we put stones in the bottom is so that there's some drainage there for your little plants. So we have given you enough stones, basically just enough to cover the bottom of your jar. So you're going to want to make sure they get spaced out there. And if your hand doesn't fit in quite so good, you can just give it a little shake. Make sure they get all nice and even. After that, our next step is to cover those little rocks with some moss. Now, the moss you're going to find is quite crunchy and not very easy to work with. So I'm going to recommend that you put your moss in a little bowl of water, just for a second to get it to soak. And you really only need enough moss to cover those rocks. So it won't take probably all of this moss in my little jar here, or my little bowl here, but that's okay. And it'll be a little easier to work with once it's wet. It goes from crunchy to really soft, actually. It's kind of cool. And all you're going to do is squish that moss out and gently lay it in your jar. I'm just going to cover those little rocks up. So we're leaving that little drainage pocket in the bottom where the stones are. Okay. Just going to pack that in there real nice. Perfect. We got a nice little layer of moss in there. We'll just set our extra moss aside. And then on top of our moss, we're going to put our charcoal. Now what the charcoal does is it acts like a filter. So it helps to keep the algae or any sort of bacteria like that down in your terrarium. Now the dust is a little bit dirty in there, so just let that settle for a second. And you can maybe tap your jar, make sure your charcoal's down nice and evenly. Okay, now our next ingredient is our soil. There's probably more soil in your kit than what you're going to need, but we're just going to put a wee little bit in there to start with, just enough to just barely cover our charcoal. Now, if you have plants at home, that's great, but if you've gotten some of ours from the greenhouse, they're either going to be in one of these little pellet pots or in a regular pot. So if you're dealing with a plant that's in a pellet, like a peat pot, you're not going to take anything off at all. You're just going to plant it exactly like it is. So we're just going to pop that down in here. But if it's a plastic pot, you need to take your plant out of its plastic pot. So just give it a little squish, put it upside down, give it a little tap, and out it comes just like that. Look at those awesome roots on that plant. Isn't that fantastic? That's our little spider plant. And we're going to pop him in beside here. Okay, and now around those plants, very carefully, we're going to try to pour a little bit more soil to fill in the spaces. So you're going to have to pour a little bit, and then you're going to have to use your finger and get down in there and just kind of tuck those plants in, okay? You don't want to cover them up too much. And if you find you have too much soil in your bag, that's okay. You don't have to use it all. If you need it all, that's fine too, but don't feel like it's necessary. Just going to get that soil down in that little hole on this side. Take your time, no rushing. And one last little bit in there. It might be a bit of a messy job. Okay, there are two little plants firmly tucked into the soil there. That's excellent. And now I'm just going to place in my little animals. Oh, I think I'm going to put my tiger on this side. There he is in his safari. And then I'll put my hippopotamus over here on this side. Now our last step in our terrarium is to give it a little drink of water. Now, not too much water, because once you put it in, you can't take it out. So just give it a little drink. And then wait to see, because what you're going to see is the water's going to run down in here and go down into your stones. But as you can see, the water's all on this side, and it's still pretty dry on this side. So I'm going to give it a little bit more water on the other side, and then I'm going to set it in a nice bright spot in my house to let it grow. And there you have it. I hope you have fun making your terrarium project at home too. Thanks so much for watching.